All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive today into the world of cellular energy. We're talking about the tiny powerhouses that fuel basically everything that makes life, well, alive.
It's really quite remarkable.
It is. We got a request from a listener who really wants to understand, like, the nuts and bolts of bioenergetics and how enzymes work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic for sure.
So, to kick things off, I thought we could talk about something pretty wild. Have you heard about these bioluminescent click beetle larvae?
Oh, yeah, they're incredible.
They live in termite mounds in Brazil, and get this, they actually light up.
It's like little tiny green beacons in the dark, right?
Exactly. It's a fantastic example of energy transformation, right?
Yeah.
Like they're converting chemical energy into light energy. But before we get lost in the glow, let's back up a bit. What are the essentials we need to have a handle on to really understand how cells power themselves? I'm ready to get into the nitty-gritty.
All right, let's do it. So we're going to be exploring metabolism, which is basically all the chemical reactions that are happening within an organism. We'll break down how energy gets transformed from one form to another. We'll dive into the concept of free energy, and then we'll figure out the role of ATP, that's like the cell's energy currency. And of course, we can't forget about enzymes, those remarkable proteins that speed up and orchestrate the reactions that make life possible.
Sounds like we're going to unlock the secrets of what makes life tick.
We'll give it our best shot.
Okay, so let's start with metabolism. We hear this word all the time, but I think, honestly, it can be kind of a head scratcher. What does it actually mean in the context of, like, those glowing beetle larvae, for instance?
So think of metabolism as like the sum total of all the chemical transformations happening within an organism. It's like a bustling city, right? With countless processes all happening simultaneously. So in those larvae, their metabolism is what's responsible for taking the chemical energy that's stored in their food and transforming it into the light energy that we see as this bioluminescence. And it's not just about breaking things down. Metabolism also involves building up molecules, which actually requires energy.
So it's this constant, like, interplay of breaking down and building up, kind of like a perfectly choreographed dance inside each cell.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. We call these interconnected series of reactions metabolic pathways. And just like a well-organized city, those pathways are carefully regulated to ensure that everything runs smoothly.
Okay, I love that analogy. So we've got this, like, cellular city bustling with activity, but what are the laws that govern how energy behaves in these systems? What are, like, the ground rules?
That's where the laws of thermodynamics come in. They're these fundamental principles that apply to all systems, including our glowing larvae. The first law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or transformed. So like in our example, it's going from chemical energy to light energy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But the second law always kind of tripped me up. It says that the universe tends toward disorder, right?
Mhm.
But living things seem incredibly ordered and complex. It's like, look at a sunflower or a delicate spider web.
Mm.
How do those fit into the picture?
Yeah, it's a common misconception that life somehow defies the second law. It doesn't. While organisms create order within themselves, they actually do so by taking in organized forms of matter and energy from their surroundings, and they release less organized forms. So ultimately, they are increasing the overall entropy or disorder of the universe.
So it's like organisms are these pockets of amazing order amidst a universe that's always leaning towards chaos. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Mm.
But, okay, if a reaction is spontaneous, meaning it releases energy, wouldn't it just, like, happen quickly? Like, poof, it's done, like a sparkler burning out?
Not necessarily. A reaction's spontaneity is determined by something called free energy change, and scientists can actually calculate whether a reaction will happen spontaneously or not. They use a formula that takes into account the total energy change and the temperature. But even if a reaction wants to happen, sometimes it needs a little nudge to get going.
So it's like even if a reaction is going downhill, it might still need a push to get rolling.
Exactly. And that's where enzymes come in. They act as these catalysts, speeding up reactions by lowering this energy barrier. It's like greasing the wheels. Without enzymes, a lot of these essential reactions that happen in our bodies would occur far too slowly to support life.
So they're like the ultimate facilitators, making sure the cell's chemistry is running at the right speed.
Precisely. And each enzyme is highly specific. It can recognize and bind to a particular molecule called its substrate. It's like a lock and key. Only the right key will unlock that reaction.
That's incredible. But how does a cell manage to control this complex web of metabolic pathways with thousands of reactions all happening at once? It seems like it would be complete chaos.
That's where enzyme regulation comes in. One way that cells do this is through something called allosteric regulation. Imagine like a control panel on each enzyme with buttons that can activate or inhibit its activity. The molecules that bind to these buttons are regulators. They help to fine-tune the enzyme's work.
So it's like this intricate control system that's making sure that the right reactions happen at the right time, at the right speed, nothing spiraling out of control. But how does the cell know when to hit the on or off switch on these enzymes?
Well, one really clever mechanism is something called feedback inhibition. Think of a thermostat. When the end product of a pathway builds up, it acts as a signal to kind of shut down that pathway, preventing the cell from overproducing. It's all about maintaining this balance and efficiency.
It's like the cell has this incredible internal communication system, right? Making sure everything is running smoothly and nothing's getting wasted.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, and it really is remarkable how much is happening inside every single cell, and it's all powered by energy transformations. So that brings us back to that concept of free energy. It's not just some abstract idea, it's really the key to understanding how cells do all the work they need to do.
Yeah, I've always kind of struggled to wrap my head around free energy. It's like, I get that it's the energy available to do work, but can you, give me a real-world example to help me visualize it?
Sure, imagine a rock perched on a cliff.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of potential energy because of its position.
Right.
It's unstable, it wants to roll down to a lower energy state at the bottom. So free energy is kind of like that. It's a measure of a system's instability, its tendency to change.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see it. So the rock rolling downhill is releasing energy, just like those larvae releasing energy as light. But cells also need to, build things up, and that requires energy. So how do they manage to, pay for those uphill reactions?
That's where ATP comes in. It's like the cell's energy currency, constantly being spent and earned. When ATP is broken down, it releases energy that can be used to power those uphill reactions. It's like the cell is using ATP to buy the building materials and pay its workers to construct these complex molecules.
So ATP is kind of like a rechargeable battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Storing energy that can be used for all sorts of cellular work.
Yeah.
But how does it actually transfer that energy to where it's needed? It's not like there are, tiny wires running through the cell.
Right. It's a really brilliant mechanism called energy coupling. Basically, the energy that's released from breaking down ATP is used to drive those uphill reactions that need energy. And often this involves transferring a phosphate group from ATP to another molecule. It's like it makes it more reactive, gives it that energy boost it needs to get going.
So it's like ATP is giving that uphill reaction a little shove
Yeah.
to help it get over the hump.
Precisely.
But how does the cell keep up with the demand? I mean, it must be burning through ATP like crazy.
It is, and that's why there's this constant cycle of ATP breakdown and regeneration. Processes like breaking down glucose during cellular respiration provide the energy needed to recharge those ATP batteries, so to speak.
It's mind-blowing to think about how much ATP our bodies go through.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that we use up nearly our body weight in ATP every single day,
Wow.
if it wasn't constantly being recycled.
Yeah, it really highlights how central this ATP cycle is to life. But, there's another challenge that cells face, even with a steady supply of ATP. Sometimes reactions just happen way too slowly, even if they're energetically favorable. Like, if you dissolve sugar in water, it'll eventually break down, but it takes, forever.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if it's a downhill reaction, shouldn't it just happen spontaneously and quickly? What's the holdup?
It goes back to that energy barrier we talked about earlier. Even if a reaction is energetically favorable, it still needs to overcome that initial hump to get started. And that's where enzymes come in. They're like the ultimate catalyst, speeding up reactions by lowering that activation energy barrier.
So they're not changing whether a reaction will happen or not, but they're making it happen much faster. It's like they're removing the roadblocks on the metabolic highway.
Exactly. And they do this in incredibly clever ways. Enzymes have a specific region called the active site. It's kind of like a perfectly shaped pocket for their substrate to fit into. And when the substrate binds, the enzyme actually changes shape slightly, kind of snuggling up to it. It's like a handshake.
Wait, so the enzyme isn't just static, it's actually dynamic and adapting to its substrate. That's amazing, but I still don't get how they can be so specific. Each enzyme is programmed to only work on one specific molecule, right? So how do they manage that level of selectivity?
It all comes down to their intricate three-dimensional structure. These enzymes are like tiny, precisely shaped machines. Their structure is absolutely critical to how they work. And even, a small change in their shape can affect their function.
There's not magic, it's just incredible molecular engineering. But hold on. If enzymes are so efficient at speeding up reactions, how does the cell keep things from, like, going haywire? Wouldn't everything just happen at once?
That's a great question. And it brings us right back to the importance of regulation. Cells have these very sophisticated mechanisms to control enzyme activity and make sure things happen in the right order at the right pace.
Right, like we talked about allosteric regulation, those like control buttons that can activate or inhibit enzymes.
Yeah.
But are there other factors that can, like, influence enzyme activity? What about the cell's environment?
Absolutely. Things like temperature and pH can have a huge impact on enzyme activity. Think about pepsin, for example, the enzyme in our stomachs that breaks down proteins. It functions best in a highly acidic environment, the kind that would destroy most other enzymes.
Wow, so not only are enzymes these, like, super efficient catalysts, but they're also specifically adapted to their environment. It's like every detail is perfectly tuned to make life work.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the bigger picture of metabolism as a whole. This incredible network of interconnected pathways, all powered by energy transformations and orchestrated by these remarkable enzymes.
It really is incredible to think that all this is happening inside of us right now in every single cell. We've zoomed in from those glowing beetle larvae all the way down to, like, these tiny molecular machines. It's a whole universe of activity going on.
It really is. And what's fascinating is that it's not just chaos down there. It's all very beautifully orchestrated. We talked about how enzymes speed up reactions, but the cell also has to keep those reactions in check. Remember our discussion about allosteric regulation, those like control buttons on
Oh
enzymes.
yeah, those are pretty cool. It's like the cell can fine-tune the activity of each enzyme to keep everything running smoothly.
Exactly. And one really common way this happens is through feedback inhibition. It's like a built-in safety mechanism, to make sure that the cell doesn't waste energy making more of something than it needs.
Okay, give me an example, because my brain is starting to feel full.
All right, imagine a factory that produces isoleucine. It's an amino acid that's essential for building proteins. So as isoleucine levels start to rise, it actually acts as a signal to the factory, saying, hey, we've got enough isoleucine for now. You can slow down production. It's like a self-regulating system.
So the product itself is actually controlling its own production.
Oh.
That's super clever. It's like a thermostat for the cell, making sure everything stays balanced.
Precisely. And this kind of regulation is happening all the time for all sorts of molecules and pathways, ensuring that the cell operates efficiently and doesn't waste precious energy.
It's amazing how much we've covered today: metabolism, thermodynamics, free energy, ATP, enzymes, and how they're regulated. It's like we've gone on this whirlwind tour of the cell's energy landscape.
It's quite a lot to take in.
It is, but I think it all comes together to paint this, like, incredible picture of how life works at its most fundamental level. What stands out to you as the most, I don't know, awe-inspiring part of all of this?
Honestly, for me, it's the sheer complexity and interconnectedness of it all. Like every single reaction, every pathway is part of this delicate web that sustains the organism. And enzymes are really the key players in all of this, orchestrating this whole intricate dance of life.
It's funny, we started off talking about those bioluminescent beetle larvae, and now I'm seeing them in a whole new light. It's not just some cool phenomenon, it's really a testament to the incredible power of energy transformations and that precise control of enzymes.
It is. And what's even more exciting is that, understanding these fundamental principles opens up so many possibilities.
Like, give me some real-world applications.
Well, think about medicine, for example. If we understand how enzymes work, then we can develop drugs that target specific enzymes to treat diseases. Or in biotechnology, we can harness enzymes to create new materials or break down pollutants. The possibilities are truly endless.
So to wrap things up today, I think I'm left with this, like, thought-provoking question for our listener. Knowing how diverse and powerful enzymes are, how could we use them to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges, like climate change or food security? It's definitely something to ponder as we, continue to explore this fascinating world of cellular processes.
Absolutely. There's so much more to discover, and who knows what amazing applications we'll uncover in the future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating world of cellular energy and enzymes with us. And remember, the next time you see, like, a firefly glowing or feel your own heartbeat, you can really appreciate the incredible molecular machinery that makes it all possible.